Are we live? I think I'm live. Wonderful. Awesome. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. All right. Okay, right now, I can't tell if I'm live or not. YouTube does this weird thing now where it shows like my thumbnail. It says I'm live. Okay, it says that I'm live. Said I'm live. All right. Awesome. Wonderful. Welcome back, everybody. Let's dive right into it, shall we? Last live stream of the month. You know what that means? It means it is time for a live feedback session. Let me double check OBS. It says my mic is working. Let's check Cubase, make sure it's picking up. All right, so I got this little pizzicato string action going on there. Something, I don't know what this is. But yeah, says we're good. Can y'all hear me? I'm going to assume y'all can hear me, all right, until someone says otherwise. Let's dive in, shall we? So, only a couple submissions this week, all right? So we've got 3 submissions this week, which means we can spend a little extra time on each one. We can give a little bit more feedback. We can go over some more topics. And as usual, you guys understand the role. Hey, wonderful. Thank you, Gibberish. Here we go. Starting off with Karthik, all right? I have shared my entry for the composition contest, and I want feedback on the sounding. I want to know why it's not sounding professional. Is it the mix or the arrangement? If you can shed light on what could have worked better compositionally, that would be great. Awesome. Welcome. Hey, Judith. Good to see you, my friend. All right, let's listen to it, Karthik. Let's see what you got. Let's go theater mode. Wonderful work, my friend. Wonderful. All right, so you were asking about what you could have done to make it sound a bit more professional. There are 2 main issues here. All right, one that's pretty big and one that's just kind of like something to keep in mind. The first one, let's talk about the biggest one. The biggest issue with this piece is a lack of clarity. All right, so this is a topic that pops up a lot in these live streams. All right. Clarity is the ability for your audience to follow along with the music, all right? So, actually, you know what? It might be better to demonstrate an idea first. Let's try opening. I'm going to pull this over here. Let's try pulling up a piece of mine. Let's find a sketch. A sketch would work really well. Let's see here. Let's do... Let's see here. Let's pull this one up. This is one I've been pulling up a lot lately. This is a sketch from one of my more recent soundtracks. So the idea of clarity is that it's threefold. It comes back to those 3 pillars that I was talking about, that I always talk about. Separation, focus, and balance. The idea of separation is that each idea happening in your music should have its own identity. You should be able to identify, oh, that's the melody. Oh, those are the chords. That's the bass line. Why is my computer taking so long to load this project? I don't know. But focus, like separation tends to come very intuitively to a lot of people. What you are lacking with this arrangement is the second pillar, focus, which is a clear hierarchy over which idea is most important. There's a lack of, okay, what is taking so long for Cubase to open? Let me see here, make sure Cubase isn't crashing. It's been a minute since I've restarted my computer. All right. All right, it says it's loading. It says it's working. Here we go. So, let's find a good spot. Let's do... All right, so if I play this part for you right here, can you follow along? It'd be helpful if there was sound. Uh-oh. Chances are, for me, that sounded fine. But chances are for you, it did not. And there's a reason why. Because with focus, the pillar of focus, the strongest determining factor is novelty. How familiar are you with the material? All right. So if you hear this, we've got several layers going on. We have a heterophonic texture, a heterophonic spelling of the melody. We have the melody. We have rhythmic chords. We have a pulsing bass line, and we have a reinforced bass line. So if we were to collapse each of these even further, so that there's less separation across pitch between these ideas, it's going to sound even more chaotic. Well, actually a little less chaotic, because I just realized, obviously, the piano is struggling to play all parts. Where was I at with this? Hey, welcome, Douglas. So, the idea of focus. How does this all apply to you? Novelty is... man, okay, I need to take a moment to stop and think. I have to collect my thoughts. So, we have all of this craziness going on. What happens if we start off a little bit earlier and we introduce each layer one at a time? First the pulsing bass, then the rhythmic chords, finally the melody. All right, all that. So that was much easier to follow along, right? So the pillar of focus has a very important element to it, which states novelty demands attention. All right, change demands attention. If there are too many new layers in your music all at once, the listener doesn't know where to pay attention to. There are different tricks you can throw in there if you'd like here and there to help out with it. But all of this being a super roundabout way that may or may not have been helpful to say, the biggest issue with this track right now is you have so many ideas that you are introducing all at once. Let's hear it and listen to it again. There's like 4 or 5 layers there minimum going on. Now, that's not a bad thing. A lot of beginners have this idea that they need their music to be incredibly complex, incredibly rich, so many layers. And there's nothing wrong with that, but a lot of people when they're starting out don't understand how to get that. All right? So if you are going to have multiple layers happening at the same time, it has to be earned. All right? You have to introduce them one at a time, at least a couple bars at a time, to help introduce the ideas. Even a fugue from the Baroque period, where it's multiple melodies being laid on top of each other, introduces each idea one at a time, allowing the audience to get to know each layer individually before it happens. All right, so again, that idea of having all of these different layers. Let's see if we can have another idea come up. All right, let's pop up another idea. No. I think I've I'm going to go down a rabbit hole if I do that. So we'll avoid that unless I get some more questions about it. So I'll say if you would like to learn more, I'd say that's the biggest issue is the lack of clarity. You have too many ideas that you're trying to shoehorn in all at once. I am scatterbrained today, people. I'm sorry. So at the beginning, you have one idea that's good. Then the harp comes in. Then you have lower strings while the brass are entering at the same time. You've got great ideas here, but they're all coming in too fast. At any given point, here's some practical tips. At any given point, your music should have a maximum of 3 general layers. All right? Layer number 1 is the foreground. Layer number 2 is the background. And layer number 3 is the midground. All right? The foreground equals the material you want your audience to pay the most attention to. All right? The background is all the layers that help contribute to the personality of the foreground. So think things like chord progression, bass line, counter melodies, stuff like that. Then the midground is all layers that contribute to the music but don't play a key role in the personality of the foreground. All right, so you can have ideas like ear candy, little like cymbal crashes here or there or something, harp trills, anything you want to kind of throw in to kind of create just kind of a little more atmosphere for the music, but it's not responsible. If you were to remove them, the personality of your melody wouldn't suddenly change. Is this making sense? Am I just kind of rambling here? My brain has been all over the place today. I've been working on so many different things today. My brain's kind of like fried. Does that make sense? Do people have questions? So, as people are popping in questions for chats, so the lack of clarity. If you want clarity, here's a quick crash course. If you want to make sure that your music has clarity. All right, thank you, Douglas. To create clarity, there are 3 pillars, 3 things your music must have to have a clear sound. Number 1 is separation. All right? Each layer in your music must stand as its own unique layer. All right? That being said, that like the audience should be able to tell, oh, that's the chord progression. Oh, that's the melody. Oh, that's the bass line. All right? That one's pretty simple. That one comes intuitively to most composers. It usually involves separating your ideas across pitch, articulation, rhythm, and or timbre. You don't need all of these to be separate. For example, timbre is one where you don't really have too much of a difference many times. But pitch, you separate your ideas by pitch. One layer is higher than the others. Articulation, one type of pitch has a different, like one is crisper, more staccato, while the other one is more legato and sustained. Rhythm, they have different rhythmic ideas and timbres that can be played by different instruments or with different techniques on the same type of instrument. Again, you don't need all of these to be different. But if, for example, let's pull up, again, let's do this. We'll pull up the 30K live stream because I was working on something like that. So over here, let's pick one of these random melodies I wrote for the challenge. We have 3 layers. We have a melody, we have chords, and we have a bass line. Now, the bass line and the chords, you could argue, are shared as a layer. But the main idea is like, why are the melody and the chords seen as two different layers? But the individual lines of the chords are not. That's because the melody is higher in pitch. It's separated by pitch from the chords. It has its own rhythm and shape. The chord voices do not. Each of these chord voices have an identical rhythm. Each of these chord voices they move together. Again, identical rhythm. They have the same style. They're all played sustained. All right. And these elements are what allow us to create more separation. If we were to orchestrate this, the chords could be played by different instruments in the melody, and that would create more separation. But the idea is you can tell that these are different layers. So that's the key, the first pillar of separation. All right? Pillar number 2, which is where a lot of people tend to fall apart. Focus. At any given point, each layer must fit within a hierarchy. All right? Some layers are more important than others. Your audience should naturally focus on what you want them to focus on. All right? Which again is usually the melody. If we have this little idea here, again, it would be helpful if it would play. Notice how your ears are going to stick to the melody. Chances are you were following along with the melody. You weren't paying attention to the bass line. You weren't paying attention to the chords, although those are there. You were focusing on the melody. And that is because there are 3 things that demand focus. The first and most powerful is change. All right? Layers that develop or add new ideas demand more attention than repetitive layers. All right? This is the single most powerful tool. All right? And this is why a lot of pieces sound like they lack clarity when you first hear them. It's because there are too many new ideas being added at the same time. All right? And if you just stretch them out a little bit, introduce them one after the other, you can adjust that. Because the second most powerful is activity. All right? Layers that are more rhythmically active demand more attention than layers that are less rhythmically active. However, this is weaker than the first one. So even though you have a very fast rhythmic strings in the background, doesn't mean that they're going to demand more attention from the melody if they're repetitive and their fast rhythmic idea gets established as repetitive. So again, if they're introduced at the same time, it hasn't had enough time to be established as repetitive. And so they're going to fight each other and your mix is going to sound cluttered. All right? There will be a lack of clarity. But if you have a repetitive idea and you give it time to be established as repetitive, then you can introduce your melody and it'll sound much clearer. All right? Then the last one is pitch. It's the weakest. All things being equal, meaning that you have 2 ideas, they are equally repetitive, they are equally rhythmically active. The layer with a higher pitch will demand more attention. And again, there's a clear hierarchy for these 3. And then the third pillar is balance. Assuming you have separation and focus taken care of, all layers should be approximately equal in power/volume. All right? You don't need your melody to be super loud compared to the bass line if it already has separation and focus. All right? There's no purpose. There's no need for the discrepancy in volume because you already have a natural tendency to focus on the melody. All right? And so if you already make your background way quieter than your melody, it just sounds out of balance. It sounds a little weird. But, so that would be the biggest one. That's what I would say. I think this is a lovely, lovely piece. I think it just lacks a bit of clarity at times. You try to introduce too many ideas all at the same time. So if you streamline it a little bit, and again, if you want to learn more, you can look up Tabletop Composer, 3 pillars. This video right here will go in depth on each of these topics. But wonderful, wonderful work, Karthik. I think work on that, and it's going to level up your game significantly. All right. Excellent. Before we move on to the next one, anyone have any questions? All right, I'm going to do a quick ad break, obviously, because I have to pay my bills. Any questions? But we guys got questions? Pop them in the comments. I'll address them. We don't have too many submissions this week, so I can do some Q&A and stuff while we do it as well. So, to each of you, I'm looking for 2 new students. All right, so I have specific students that I'm looking for. So, if you go on my private lessons section, you'll see that I have an option for a custom 12-week course. All right? The idea here is that I can get a couple students who want to get together and they want to do a custom-made class, all right, on any topic they want based on skills. This is something I love to do. I love doing curriculum design. It's what I trained in college. It's what I like to do on the side. It's a lot of fun for me. So I have 2 students right now who want to form a 12-week class all about string writing. All right, which happens to be one of my strengths. I am quite adept at orchestrating for strings. They want to learn styles of like writing for trailers. They want to learn about writing more romantic styles like John Williams. They want to do all kinds of films. They want to be able to do like a 12-week class, a semester-long class, all dedicated to writing cinematic, classical style string pieces. All right. We are looking, before I can do the class, we need to fill it up with at least 2 more students. All right. If it's 2 more students, then the price for each student will be $375. That is 12 private lessons, each once per week. You get recordings of each lesson, and you get notes, and you get feedback on your homework. 12 lessons for just $375. If we get 3 more students, that price goes down to $300 per student. All right, same deal, 12 private lessons, detailed feedback on each of your music for only $300 per student. If you are interested in this, let me know. Like I said, the class doesn't happen unless we get at least 2 more students. So if this is something you'd be interested in, let me know. Reach out on email, over Instagram, Discord, what have you. Let's see if we can get this thing put together, shall we? Douglas, I am looking for a bass clarinet sample for a project I'm working on. Any suggestions for free samples? At the moment, I'm not ready to drop money on one sound. I would recommend Musio. They are not free, but they're the best dang deal you're going to find. All right? 99 cents per month for 3 months, and then it's only $10 per month. All right? Musio is insane. They are one of those libraries where when they first came out, I genuinely thought they were a scam because it's too good of a deal, and it took me a long time to actually buy into them. But you get all of these libraries for $10 a month, and it's insane. There are a lot of like the Cinesample libraries are professional quality. So let's see here, bass clarinet. Bass clarinet right here. You got all, ooh, big old thunderstorm just pulled into my area, and I didn't even notice it. But yeah, Musio, best freaking deal. If you get them, make sure you let them know I sent you. I have a link, I believe, in the description. I am an affiliate of Musio, so I get a little kickback when people sign up. I don't think my link works though. I think it's been a while since I've updated it, so I gotta check that out. So hope that helps. All right, awesome. So let's move on to the next one, shall we? Gibberish Chris. I am working on a piece of music, and I have a movement in which I'm switching from A minor to C major, from A minor to C major, to A minor to A major. And I'm looking for advice for transitioning between those keys in the music. Here's a SoundCloud link to the music. If you do give feedback, thank you very much. Wonderful. Let's listen to it, shall we? And then, yeah, we can definitely talk about modulating. beautiful. You have some wonderful potential here. All right, so before I start diving into my feedback, I do want to notice a lot of you probably may have noticed how dark it suddenly got. So there is a massive storm pulling into my neighborhood at the moment. We've been going through an unbearable heat wave in Michigan. So this is actually greatly appreciated. I usually love storms, but I'm keeping an ear open for the tornado siren because usually when we have a huge heat wave and then a storm comes in, that's usually a good recipe for a tornado. So if I lose power, sorry. If the tornado siren goes off, I will have to call it early and head down in the basement. But unless that happens, I think we're just going to keep pushing forward. All right, so wonderful, wonderful potential with this. All right, so I want to say something real quick because I know it's not what you asked, but first piece of advice. I'm sorry, it's just a massive. I love storms. I love. When I was little, my mom used to try and keep us from being scared by storms by wrapping us up in blankets and like taking us out to like the porch to watch the storms come in. That way, when we were little, we'd associate storms with like good memories. And so now the side effect of that is I actually freaking love storms. They feel very nostalgic to me. But this one is a tormenta. This is something big. All right. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. So a little piece of advice that I would recommend when you are writing for a unique kind of like a group like this. 2 bassoons, clarinet, flute, and oboe. And I forgot flat was a thing. Flat is Google's music notation software, isn't it? When you're doing this, one of the greatest advantages of this kind of group is that each individual instrument has its moment to shine. So for most of this, it sounds like you're using all of the instruments. Don't be afraid to pull back a little bit. Let the clarinet and flute have their moment. Let the oboe come in and with a solo when it's just accompanied by a single bassoon in the background. Don't be afraid to mix and match. You can't be afraid to let some musicians just sit on stage for a little bit. Anytime you study a lot of the old symphonies or even more of the programmatic music of the Impressionistic era, something you'll notice is a lot of instruments just don't get used. A lot of them, I think it's like Brahms in one of his symphonies, a lot of Beethoven symphonies, will have just entire movements with no brass instruments and saving them for like the big powerful finale kind of thing. So don't be afraid to give yourself permission to not use instruments, to allow certain instruments to be featured and let others just wait their turn. All right. That way you can take advantage of having a wider palette of sound colors. Instead of having the color of just all the instruments playing at once, you have the color of the flute and the oboe, or the clarinet and the bassoon, or any other kind of combo. So that's my first feedback. But you were asking about modulation. All right. So modulation, there's all kinds of strategies. First one I'm going to recommend, we'll go through layers of, we'll talk about 3 types. The first is called a gear shift modulation. All right. Unprepared. These are particularly powerful and useful in film music. All right, let's see. What's this idea? This is just like the little thing I have for... All right, so this is an idea we wrote for a previous live stream. All right, so a gear shift modulation would say take everything and just move it up or down. So let's listen to it now. You don't need to worry about it. There's no preparation. There's no setup. This became particularly popular in the past 100 years or so, just because it results in a very dramatic sound. So something you'll notice is when you modulate up, it results in a feeling of increased energy. All right? When you modulate down, it results in a feeling of decreased energy. So let's do this again. Let's listen to it again. And this time we are going to copy and paste this, and it will go modulate back down to the original key. Ooh, that's the big one, folks. Big old storm. We've got, so we'll listen to the original key, then we'll modulate into a new key where it moves up, and then we're going to feel an increase in energy. And when it comes back down, we're going to find a decrease in energy, or the overall perception of a decrease in energy. So increase in energy, got brighter. Now it's gonna get darker. Well, maybe not quite dark because it took us back to a key that we were familiar with. So instead of using that as in our example, let's take our original and let's modulate again, this time going down. Welcome, SD. Don't worry, yours is next. Do you... One second. There we go. See the sense of kind of releasing tension. All right, so that's one type of modulation. Like I said, it's called like a gear shift modulation because it's just, it happens. All right, the next one you're going to have is something called a, well, the others are called prepared modulations. We could have a pivot modulation where you use a shared chord to pivot to a new key. All right. So that's the idea that you have two keys, they have a chord in common, so you end the first chord progression on the shared key and you push into the next one. All right, so I don't think we have an example prepped right off the bat, but if we were to do a chord progression, let's say we are going from C major, you said to A major, right? That is, don't want horns. SD Sheridan, you said that you never gave me a specific ask for your piece. Do you? I need one. Let me know what you want feedback on. All right, so let's say we've got C major, and you want to transition to A major. All right, so we could look between each of the chords and see which chords do we have in A major. All right, so in A major, we have this. So we would have it's a sharp. We have 0 chords in common with C major. That's okay. So if you really wanted to pivot, instead of using a pivot chord, I would recommend a secondary dominant, where you just end, where you say, all right, this is the first chord of my new chord progression, A major. I really need to make sure that I'm pulling into the A major, so I'm going to borrow the dominant, and I'm going to end my first chord progression with the dominant chord of my new key. All right? Let's get piano. See how satisfying that sounds? And if you really, really wanted to, you could set that up by adjusting your chord progression and having it lead in from an E minor or an E major. Let's do the first full chord progression. See how beautiful and seamless that felt? Because you had that secondary dominant to help pull in between. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm rushing this concept a little bit. No worries, no worries. Let's see here. So pivot modulation, we should pivot chord. You could do secondary dominant. Use a secondary dominant chord to set up your new key. Now, this becomes especially important. There's one that you mentioned, modulating between C major and A minor. That one's pretty relatively simple, because C major to A minor, you would just use again, the dominant chord of your A minor key to land in the A minor key. So over here we have C major, then we use the chord to pivot into A minor. Does that make sense? It's basically the secondary dominant strategy again. 2, 5, 1 into new key. So yes, so we could do, so what Judith is saying is you can use a very specific combination of chords. So for example, A minor, we could use a E major, the 5, and then the 2, which is B diminished. Oops, let's read this up. And your chord progression, C major with the 2 and the 5. I feel like I'm not explaining myself very well. Sorry, I am very distracted by the storm going on. It's getting lighter out, but I feel like my brain is a little scatterbrained. So, if I am not being quite clear, my friend, here's what I'm going to recommend. Look up Tabletop Composer modulation, because guess what? I've been doing this for a very long time. Yeah. Master modulation, live music lesson. I did a live stream where I prepared for this. I talked about modulation in my members only live stream. Tertian harmony modulation. So that's one of my shorts. But yeah, that's something I discuss at length in my book as well. Yes, ADHD. Yeah, I got all kinds of stuff going right now. I got my ADHD. I got the big storm outside. Got all kinds of stuff. But another thing that you can look up if you want more description, Tabletop Composer, secondary dominance. I've been doing this for a long time, people. I have videos for like everything. Tritone substitution is a good one. Secondary dominance, quick theory right here. It's a 3-minute video that talks about this in depth. So you can check that out. But yeah, so those would be the 3 I would recommend. All right, gear shift modulation, pivot modulation when accessible, and then secondary dominant modulation. Which, like I said, you just end your chord progression with the dominant chord of your new key to help prepare the pull to the next one. Does that make sense? Is that helpful? Let me know. If not, I'll try to do a better job. But we are now on to the final submission of this time around. We have Samuel's live feedback. Samuel, did you say you had one yet or something? I had some downtime while people were talking and would like to know how to write music there without it being boring. All right, awesome. So let's give it a listen, shall we? Glad to help. Ooh, I like that. Very nice. I like that one. That's a good one. So let's see. Well, all of these have been wonderful. So Sheridan, without any specific requests to like focus on what I should listen to, and since I can only really listen to it once, the only thing that really stood out to me, aside from a few mixing things here and there, was again a concept we discussed earlier in the live stream, which is the idea of clarity, which honestly was only really a bit of an issue at the very beginning. And again, you can solve that with a little bit of incremental complexity. So if we start over again, if you listen to it, you've got a couple different ideas that you're introducing all at once. So So you've got three ideas. You've got your strings, you've got those synths, and you've got the choir. All right. Now, the synths and the strings are very repetitive. All right, which is a good thing in this case because they very rapidly fall into the background, and that allows the choir to come forward and take the foreground. But notice, for a lot of the people listening, maybe not you because you've listened to it a bunch of times, so your ears have already acclimated to the repetitiveness of the other layers. But if you were to take some breaks, take some time off, and then listen to it freshly, you'll notice the first couple seconds of this feel very chaotic. If I pause right there, there's not much that you can make from it. All right. And I know it's like 3 seconds of music, but it already comes off as very chaotic. It's not until we listen to it for a little bit longer that a clear hierarchy comes out. But then by that point, you're already introducing another idea. So the idea is kind of like the running theme for a lot of these pieces today is the idea. If I had to take like a lesson to apply to everything that I've forgotten today, is don't worry about being too complex too quickly. All right. A lot of, not saying, I have no idea what everybody's beginner level is, but a lot of beginner composers here tend to rush to the idea that their music needs to be complex, that it has to have many different layers. To demonstrate their skill, to demonstrate that they are not beginners, they are not amateurs. But complexity has to be earned. Complexity isn't something that can be done for its own sake. Complexity needs to be done in service of the larger picture. The most beautiful, complex pieces of music you've ever written, you'll find are actually done quite simply. The complexity comes through the simplicity. And there's a hierarchy. When you try to throw too many things all at once just for the sake of being complex, your music takes a hit. It loses clarity of design. It becomes chaotic. It becomes muddy. And if that's what you're looking for, awesome, wonderful. But one of the reasons I like this piece is it very quickly establishes those principles that I talked about earlier. How those layers, even though they're all introduced at once, and it becomes chaotic because they're all introduced at once, 2 of the layers are very repetitive. So right off the bat, they very quickly fall into the background and you get the established hierarchy that the choir is the most interesting, most developing layer in the music. So the biggest takeaway from this stream is I would say don't be afraid to be simple. Don't be afraid to take your time to build into your complexity. If you try to jumpstart right at the beginning of the piece with a very complex texture, it's going to come off as chaotic unless it's handled very, very carefully. So don't be afraid to introduce things one layer at a time. Don't be afraid to earn the complexity of your music. And don't be afraid to just allow yourself to work with simple ideas. The simplicity is where clarity comes in folds. All right. But wonderful, wonderful work, my friends. That's it. That's the third piece. We got 3 pieces submitted this time. Got us another small batch. I should probably, I blame myself. I forgot that it was this week. And so I didn't put out the announcement until about halfway through the week. SD Sheridan, how would you do this on a time limit? Because this was an opening scene. How would I do this on time limit? So 1 minute. So let's say I have 1 minute. If this is an opening scene, I would just do it. Like, that's okay. That was singularly unhelpful advice. I would just do it. What I would say is if you have 1 minute, I would make a priority list. Which idea is the most important? All right. I would introduce the strings and the synths first. Just 2 or 4 bars. It doesn't take a lot. Just enough time for those ideas to be established right off the bat as being repetitive. That's where I would bring in the strings or the choir. All right, enough time to let those strings and the strings and synths to come center stage, to get their attention, to bring in and make sure that and establish themselves as repetitive, interesting but repetitive. Then the choir comes in. All right. Then a couple bars after, maybe like 2 bars or so after the choir comes in, you can introduce those other synth ideas as well. There are ways to do it. It's a matter of making a priority of which layers are most important, which ones are supported. Remember, this is a concept we said at the beginning of the live stream, that there are, did I delete? Yeah, that there are at any given point 3 maximum layers, 3 general layers. And that doesn't mean that you can only have 3 layers of music, like chords, bass line, and melody. It means there are 3 categories of material. Foreground. This is the material that your audience needs to pay the most attention to. All of your music, every other layer of the music is in service to this. If any other layer of your music is harming this, then it needs to be removed, or at the very least, adjusted. All right? The foreground is the primary idea that your audience should be paying attention to. In this case, it's the melody being played by your choir. The background are then all of the layers that help contribute to the personality of the foreground. In this case, the only layer, you have 3 other layers. You have 2 types of synths and 1 and strings. Only the strings are background. All right? Because if you remove the layer, it harms the personality of the foreground. So this is stuff like harmony. This is parts like accentuation. Different layers of the music that their primary job is to support the foreground. Their primary job is to create the personality of the foreground. Yes, the foreground has its own personality, but the background creates context that allows that personality to shine. The midground are then all of the layers that contribute to your music. Yes, they are still important, but they don't play a key role in the personality of your foreground. This is what your synths do. Your synths provide atmosphere. They provide a little bit of a kind of personality to the music as a whole, but if you removed them, the personality of your foreground would not dramatically shift. It would not change. It would still have that kind of epic choir kind of feel. It would still have that harmonic context to sound like it. Whenever you are arranging music, the priority is your foreground. What layers are in service to your foreground? Which ones are in the background? Then, because the background then becomes second priority, midground takes the smallest necessary responsibility. What's the term I'm looking for? Priority. It's the lowest priority. Yes, it's important. I'm not saying it's unimportant. But what I'm saying is if your midground layers are starting to harm your foreground or background or compete with them, then you should probably very much consider removing that layer, or at the very least adjusting it so it no longer competes. Going back to the idea of having clarity in your arrangement, of having that separation that each layer has its own identity, but that all-important pillar where people tend to fall apart, especially beginners and intermediates, is that idea of focus, making sure that there is a hierarchy to your layers. Every great piece of music that's ever been written, whether done deliberately or by accident and instinct, has focus. There is a hierarchy of which ideas should be paid attention to. Every great piece of music has these 3 things because this is what makes it intuitive. This is what makes it feel natural to us. All right, I believe that's it. So, a couple kind of housekeeping stuff. All right, again, I am looking for 2 more students to join that private class on string writing. 12 weeks worth of classes. Private instruction, weekly feedback. We have space for 2 or 3 more students who are interested. So if that sounds like you and you want 12 private lessons for the low price of only $300 for 12 hours of instruction, reach out. All right, let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. And we've got a couple more spaces in the class before that gets started. Again, the curriculum is designed around your goals. If you would like to show support, check out private lessons. Check out my blog. My blog is something I've been working on a little bit less. I got a bunch of articles on my website you can check out that got cool topics. But check out my bookshop as well. This is how I make a lot of my money. This is how I pay my bills. And yeah, I believe that's it. No more questions in the chat, so I'm going to call it a day. Thank you, my friends. Thank you to everybody who stopped by. Thank you for the wonderful, wonderful musicians who shared their music. I hope it was helpful feedback. The next live stream feedback will be the last Friday of July. So it will be July 25th will be the next live feedback stream. Mark your calendars if you want to submit music. Douglas, when doing an orchestral mock-up in my DAW, should I change a MIDI track to an audio track before starting the mixing process? That's up to you. There are advantages and disadvantages to it. Swapping, if you are happy with your arrangement and you don't want to change it, swapping to the audio file, kind of like bouncing it to audio. So for example, those of you who aren't aware what we're talking about, if you were to take like this idea and render in place and turn it into an audio file. Mixing audio files has its advantages. It's, for one, significantly less draining on your CPU and your RAM and your computer in general. Two, you can do the little nifty adjusting of volume like this. But the advantage of the MIDI is that you can make adjustments to the MIDI itself. All right. So that's a matter of how strong your computer is and your own personal style. There's no right or wrong way to do that. It's just personal preference. Excellent. Good question. So until next time, my friends, keep studying, keep working hard, keep writing new music. I will see you all next week for the next live stream. All right. Bye for now.